and thank you everyone for coming out today. My name is Chad Scott. I live here in Fernandina Beach, and I co-host a podcast called Welcome to Florida. And that podcast is all about Florida's ecology and history and personalities like a Phillip Randolph, one of the greatest labor movement and civil rights leaders in American history. Now, Gail hinted at this. A short list of A. Phillip Randolph's achievements includes pressuring the integration of defense and military industries receiving federal money gearing up for World War II. This was the Fair Employment Practices Act. He also pressured the integration of the U.S. Armed Forces and was instrumental in organizing the March on Washington. The march, of course, where Martin Luther King gave his I Have a Dream speech. Now, most people don't know, but the full name of the March on Washington was the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. Jobs and freedom. And we'll get back to that. So A. Phillip Randolph grew up in Jacksonville. His father stood up to a lynch mob coming for a fellow black resident. And this event and the casual and overt racism he saw and experienced all around him radicalized the young man. So in 1911, at 22 years old, Randolph left Jacksonville, becoming a socialist and a critic of capitalism. And he realized economic justice was fundamental to justice of any kind. Randolph saw that people who controlled wealth in the capitalist economic system were positioned to exclude access to that wealth, exclude access to upward mobility for anyone who wasn't a part of their club. And as a black man, he was definitely not part of their club. And this offended him and it outraged him. He saw socialism as a counter to this, not communism. The capitalists and the industrialists will try conjoining those two in your head. Have tried conjoining those two for over 100 years to scare Americans away from thinking there is a more equitable economic system providing greater justice than capitalism. A quote here: socialism is what they call public power. Socialism is what they called Social Security. Socialism is what they called farm price supports. Socialism is what they called bank deposit insurance. Socialism is what they called the growth of free and independent labor organizations. Socialism is their name for almost anything that helps all the people. Now, who do you think said that? Harry Truman. You got it. Not Bernie Sanders. It was Harry Truman in 1952. Hardly a lefty. Socialism is not a scary word, it is a hopeful word, because labor rights are essential to human rights, and capitalism works to diminish labor rights and human rights, and socialism works to build them. This was the sort of socialism A. Phillip Randolph supported. The kind of socialism that led to our public schools, our public libraries, our national parks, and the fire departments. Socialism is pooling society's resources for common good. Randolph saw being able to secure and keep a good-paying job as critical to equality. Labor rights as connected to civil rights and human rights. So he moved to New York and lived there during the teens and the 20s, where he saw America's first Gilded Age. An age of the Rockefellers and the Carnegies and the Vanderbilts and their mansions and summer cottages in Newport. And he saw the Bowery, and he saw the tenements and the filth and the destitution and the disease and the hunger and the catastrophic inequalities of wealth and income and health and living conditions that inordinate wealth disparities created. We now live in a second Gilded Age. Wealth and income disparities now exceed that of the Rockefellers and the Morgans. In 2024, median pay packages for CEOs at the S&P 500 companies rose 10%, up to $17.1 million per year. Did you get a 10% raise last year? No. 17.1 million on average? In 2023, chief executives earned 290 times the salary of an average worker. Compare that to 1965, when their compensation was 21 times that of a typical employee. 290 versus 21. I'm going to need your help here in just a minute. More than a dozen billionaires occupy positions in the Trump regime's cabinet and administration. Their total net worth equals at least $450 billion. And now would be an appropriate time to boo. Boo! That is called oligarchy. Government of, by, and for the wealthy. And that doesn't include Elon Musk. Now would be another appropriate time to boo. Elon Musk, the unelected shadow president and proud Nazi for who the roughly $250 million he spent helping fund Trump's re-election campaign, was given carte blanche in the early months of the regime to destroy the federal government, to eviscerate the federal government and the regulatory state, ensuring that it can't work, making his prophecies of government inefficiency and incompetence come true. So those tasks, once competently carried out by the federal government and unionized federal employees, can instead be taken up by private industry and private companies, including Musk's. She was a great investment. That $250 million Musk spent putting Trump into office will come back to him over and over and over again in government contracts for work to be performed by his companies, work that was once performed by the federal government and union labor. That doesn't also include America's second and third richest men, white men, Jeff Bezos and Mark Zuckerberg. Yes, another appropriate time to boo. Bezos, Zuckerberg, and Musk combined to control more wealth than the bottom half of all Americans. Three people with more wealth than 165 million. And they use that wealth to buy our politicians from the top down. That's a bunch of crap. Bezos and Zuckerberg and Musk stood directly behind Trump at the inauguration. Unelected billionaires snuggling at the right hand of power, bending their knee to Trump's vision of oligarchy, autocracy, white nationalism, white supremacy. And this is, of course, nothing new. Going back to the founding of this country, the powerful, the wealthy, the politically connected have always used economic measures to control the common people. Yes. This country was founded on enslaved labor and stolen land, two unconscionable sins. America's wealth, all of it, can be traced back to enslaved labor and stolen land. Enslaved labor. Labor, the rights of working people, have been central to every movement for justice around the world because you cannot have voting rights if you're enslaved or indentured. Women's rights don't exist in bondage, in servitude to men, to the wealthy, to the owners of so-called capital. Before black people or women or Native Americans could pursue any rights in this country, the right of black labor to work for themselves, to work outside of bondage, to choose when and where and how much to work for had to be established. Slavery, of course, was a labor issue. Labor rights, civil rights, human dignity. A. Phillip Randolph knew they were connected. And in his day, working as a porter in sleeping cars on trains was a great, secure job. But the most powerful industrialists in America, the villainous tech bros of their day, they controlled the railroads. Unionization of the sleeping car porters was one of the ways labor organizers attempted to overcome a broad pattern of exploiting workers in America. Wealthy people in America have never been satisfied with receiving their fair share. They want your share too.
That's right.
Wealth is a mania for them that can never be satisfied. There's never been more wealth in America than there is today. And yet the lives of regular people are no better and probably worse than they were 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, because the wealthy hoard the excess. Trickle-down economics has always been a scam.
Yes.
The wealthy buy yachts and Maseratis and fourth homes for themselves. They don't put their monies back in communities. Randolph was a tenacious, compelling, effective advocate for the interests of the sleeping car porters he represented. His intellect and credibility and organizing allowed him to make deals to unionize and professionalize the sleeping car porters who were black. He became the head of the first successful black labor union and the first black labor union to become associated with the American Federation of Labor. And this put Randolph on the national map for progressive movements broadly and civil rights concerns broadly. Randolph used sleeping car porter union dues as president of the union to support the Montgomery bus boycott. Those funds from union members helped bring Martin Luther King Jr. to Montgomery. And while we're talking about King, do we know what he was marching for and who he was marching with when he was assassinated? Yes. When Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated in Memphis, he was marching with black sanitation workers there. Striking black sanitation workers. Sanitation workers striking for safer working conditions and better pay. And when Martin Luther King Jr. was killed, he was marching for labor, for economic justice, not voting rights. Do you think that's a coincidence? Martin Luther King Jr. saw the connection between labor rights and civil rights. That's why he was interested in socialism. Call it democracy or call it socialism, but there must be a better distribution of wealth within this country for all God's children. Amen. King said in a speech to the Negro American Labor Council in 1961. King, the democratic socialist, King the radical, has been removed from his legacy. Do you think that is a coincidence? No. Back to Randolph and how his organizing led to King's most prominent speech. Randolph had been threatening and developing and strategizing what a mass march on Washington would look like for decades. The threat of doing so allowed FDR to integrate the defense industries. The threat of it allowed Truman to integrate the armed forces. And when it came time in 1963 to march on Washington for jobs and freedom, after proposed Civil Rights Act legislation was again defeated in the Congress, the legwork and organizing Randolph had already given to the idea was essential in helping another hero, Bayard Rustin, with the logistics. Those two worked together. The March on Washington was a labor action as much as it was about voting rights, or social justice, or equality more broadly. And that aspect, that focus of the march has been overlooked by history. It's just the March on Washington. Now it's not the March on Washington for jobs. Do you think that is a coincidence? No. Labor has always been central to movements for equality. Randolph knew this. King knew this. Lech Walesa in Poland knew this. And Donald Trump and the fascist villains in the Republican Party know this, which is why crushing labor and labor unions and workers was central to Project 2025. Which is why crushing labor and workers and unions was a day one emphasis of the regime, and now would be a good time to do it. Fascist, textbook. authoritarian, nationalistic, right-wing, intolerant, cruel, oppressive, racist, hateful. The dictator issued an executive order stripping nearly 1 million federal employees of their right to collectively bargain, a core expression of constitutional freedoms of association. Not that the Constitution matters to any Republican other than the Second Amendment. The dictator's attacks on unionized federal employees are an attack on democracy. Without collective bargaining, career professionals are pushed aside for political loyalists. It's a purge. We're seeing that across the federal government, from the Department of Defense to the Department of Labor and everywhere in between, where professional union employees are being purged in favor of cucked ideological sycophants. And we started seeing it 16 years ago here in Florida, America's fascism test kitchen. Whistleblowers can be punished for speaking up without union protection. Public service becomes a tool of public power. That is not justice, and that is not freedom. The right to organize is not a privilege to be granted or revoked at the president's whim. It is a fundamental principle of a free society.
Yes.
Federal workers should not have to check their constitutional rights at the door simply because they choose to serve their country. Economic justice is social justice. Economic rights are women's rights.
Yes.
How can women be considered equal in this country when they continue to be paid less than men for the same work? Women are still paid roughly 80 cents on every dollar that men make. The greatest affirmative action jobs program in American history was and is white male privilege. Tens of millions of dopey, incompetent white men given jobs and then advanced in their careers for 150 years. Not on any merit or performance, simply on their gender and on their race. Given jobs and advanced ahead of smarter, harder working, more qualified women and minorities. And this, of course, continues. Musk's illegal Doge cuts disproportionately impacted black women who lost 318,000 jobs from this February to this March alone.
True.
Do you think that is a coincidence?
No.
Targeting the jobs, the careers, the livelihoods of the most unified demographic voting bloc opposing fascism and oligarchy and the dictator and the Republicans in this country? That's a lot of coincidences. This took place during the peak of Musk, the Nazis' reign of terror, destroying the federal government. Those are good jobs. Those are professional jobs. And our representative to the House, Aaron Bean, again. Don't feel bad hating Aaron Bean. He hates you.
He's gotta go.
Bean was side by side with Musk, suckling from the Nazis' teat, a full-fledged member of Musk's federal government-destroying stormtrooper hatchet brigade. Trump and Bean and Musk and Rick Scott and Pam Bondi and the rest of the Republican fascists from the local level and city councils to the White House want to eliminate rights. They want to eliminate labor rights. The dictator brags about how throughout his failed business career he routinely stiffed overtime pay from workers. He's proud of it. How he stiffed contractors as a practice, knowing they wouldn't have the time or energy or money to fight him in the courts to receive what they've been promised. The dictator and his acolytes want to eliminate voting rights and the rights of African Americans, the rights of Native Americans, women's reproductive rights, LGBTQ plus rights, and they know an effective, essential way to achieve this is by attacking the rights of organized labor, workers' rights. I wish Phillip Randolph were here today, because we sure need him, but we don't have him. We have you, and we need you. Every one of you. We need you to stay involved. to educate yourselves, to keep showing up like this, to come together, to stay involved with Indivisible Nassau, support Gail, use whatever your strengths are with whatever time and energy you have to fight off the evildoers and save what's left of our freedom, our rights, our equality, because less and less of it survives with each passing day. And the dictator and Bean and the billionaires are coming for all of it. They want all of it. We need you. Now, A. Phillip Randolph died in 1979 at 90 years old. In Jacksonville, you can find A. Phillip Randolph Drive by the baseball stadium. There's an A. Phillip Randolph Park, A. Phillip Randolph School, and if you go to the Prime Osborne Convention Center, originally built in 1919 as the city's train station, the former so-called colored waiting room is now a meeting room named after A. Phillip Randolph. Thank you.